Hello everyone, my name is Anne Teato and welcome to the Psychic Matters podcast, episode number 87. This week's news is YouTube. Psychic Matters now has its very own YouTube channel. Or sound a bit more enthusiastic. That's better. Go take a look. YouTube at Psychic Matters. I've been working very, very hard behind the scenes, studying for hours on yet another course, learning how this new and mysterious YouTube platform works so that we, as a community of psychics, mediums, healers, light workers, paranormal investigators, psychical researchers, scientists, and experts in the field can present our work to a greater global audience as our beautiful community works together to push forward and explore further the boundaries of human consciousness. And it is with great trepidation, I can tell you, that I enter this great YouTube arena and begin to step onto this tightrope in the spotlight, all alone in my little lycra leggings, hushed crowd below, as I inch my precarious way out, step by step, into the very centre of the YouTube universe, clutching only a mic boom for balance. Will I be able to create view-worthy videos? Will I be able to hold viewers' attention with my wonderful storytelling whilst holding a camera at arm's length? Will I be a trusted ambassador for my community in this world and the next? I'm just at the beginning of this new journey, so there's not much to see on YouTube at the moment, but there will be. And I'm inviting you to come with me, dear listener. Come on over and join me on YouTube. I need your support. This is a little scary for me. Join me on YouTube at Psychic Matters, and if you choose to subscribe there, it's like you'll be holding my hand and supporting me all the way as I step out into this unknown world, and for that, I am so truly grateful to you. Meanwhile, it's back to this week's episode, where I met with Malcolm Robinson to discuss and explore some of the mysteriously strange events and jaw-dropping phenomena that he has witnessed as a paranormal investigator. I know you are going to love this episode. My incredible guest today is an author and founder of Strange Phenomena Investigations. Malcolm Robinson, welcome to Psychic Matters.
A very good day to you. It's nice to be on your show.
Thanks so much for making time for us. I know you're one busy gentleman. So, Malcolm, let's start right where you are at right now. What is your current passion and what are you working on at this moment in time?
Well, my current passion basically has always been to do with the paranormal, although I'm probably best known for my work in UFOs, ufology, etc., and probably in Nessie as well, because I've been down in a submarine in Loch Ness. But if truth be told, my heart lies with the paranormal, ghostly investigations, spending nights in haunted houses, and effectively just, enjoying the vibrancy that the psychic world brings to us. So I really enjoy that. At the moment, I'm working on my 12th book, which is a combination of the paranormal series that I've already done, and that's entitled Paranormal Case Files of Great Britain, Volume 4. And if truth be told, I'm just putting the finishing touches to that, looking at the photographs that's got to go in the book, and then getting that sent off to the publisher. So yeah, that's what I'm working on just now. And we have a big conference coming up at Glasgow University in June. That's the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference, of which myself and a number of other guest speakers will be there, purely just to educate the audience about all spooky matters and things relating to the wonderful world, which is the paranormal.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. And congratulations on your 12th book. That is a huge achievement. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, The reason why I write my books is because I receive so much information from people all over the world. And of course, during my own investigations, that there's no purpose to put all these wonderful stories in a filing cabinet. It doesn't work. These stories have got to go out to Joe Public. And somewhere in the world, somebody will come up and say, you know what? I can relate to that. I've saw that as well. And it's like a big jigsaw. Everybody's got a story to tell. And it's funny because when I give my lectures, it's always a way people come up to me and say, Malcolm, I've never told anybody about this, but I'm going to tell you. And they proceed to unload their paranormal stories. And that's the beauty of it as well. You know, you meet some wonderful, wonderful people with crazy stories, and they all just want to get that told.
Yeah, I mean, people do think they are going out of their mind when they have some of these very strange paranormal experiences. What sort of things have you been investigating, or things that really stick in your mind?
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many. Obviously, I'd like to tell you probably what is the best thing I've ever seen in my life as far as the paranormal goes. It has been told before, but maybe your listeners have not heard this. When I lived in London, we used to put on lectures in London, and I invited various guest speakers, etc. And at the close of one particular meeting, a lady came up to me and says, Malcolm, would you like to see ghosts? And of course I said, absolutely, you know. A long story short, it was a house in the outskirts of London, and just a normal council house. And she says that there was a psychic who was going to be turning up later, going into trance, and strange things would happen. So she took me upstairs and she took me into an adjacent bedroom, and she showed me this little wooden cabinet with glass shelves. And on this was rings and medals and coins with little tags on it. And I said, well, what's this? Oh, this is all apports, Malcolm. These fall into our seance room. And when you pick them up, they're very, very hot. And as you can see, Malcolm, it's all labelled when it's fell into the seance room. From there, she took us into another bedroom, which basically was devoid of much furniture. It only had a tall, slender sideboard in the corner of the room, and in the other corner of the room was a small chest of drawers. But also there was a black curtain from one corner of the room to the other, just where the corner goes. And behind that was a small plastic chair. And I says, well, what's going on here? Oh, the psychic will be along in about half an hour. You'll sit in this chair and he'll go into trance, and, you know, strange things will happen. Yeah, sounds good. So this gentleman finally made an appearance. I patted him down to ensure that he wasn't secreting any telescopic rods or anything that could, you know, give rise to false paranormal effects. He was clean, absolutely fine. So he sat on the chair and we tied him to the arms of the chair with heavy Velcro straps. In a sense, it was just like back to the old Victorian days where they did it in big tall cabinets. Only he was sitting in the corner of the room behind this black drape, this curtain. So we tied him there. He took his shoes off and his feet were sticking out of the bottom of this curtain. You could plainly see the white socks. And there were small little bells attached to the walls of this room, which will become apparent in a moment. I then knocked on the floorboards to see if there were any hidden cavities, or, you know, knocked on the walls to see if there were any false cavities in the walls, because even though I firmly believe in life after death, as a researcher, we have to ensure that nobody's out to pull the wool over your eyes and deceive you. The room looked fine. There were no trap doors or anything, you know what I mean? Nothing was there. And then I sat in front of this curtain along with three other people facing the curtain. Then the lady of the house says, right, Malcolm, we're ready to extinguish the lights. The room will go in darkness. There is a small red light on this big tall unit behind us, and you will be able to see people in the room, which was correct. We did. So she extinguished the electric light, and she started to play old kind of Victorian dancehall songs like Roll Out the Barrel, all these kind of songs. And I says, why are you doing this? Oh, it's just to create the atmosphere, Malcolm, you know, just to create that ambience. Yeah, that's fine. So within seconds, these little silver bells that was tacked into the walls, into the wallpaper, started to tinkle. And I went, oh yes, that's strange. And then suddenly voices appeared in the air all around us. Top of my head, bottom of my head, next to my ear, below the chair. And I initially thought somebody's throwing their voice, but I could clearly see the people sitting next to me in silhouette. I could see them. They were, going crazy as well. What's this? There were male voices, female voices, young, old, nattering away. And then suddenly, this black curtain pushed out about a foot or so into the middle of the room, and this moulded black face, the contours of a face appeared in this cloth, then it receded, and it was just a flat cloth again. And then what happened next was there was a small chest of drawers which was sitting next to this black curtain in the corner apex of this room. It started to wobble. Then it slowly rose up into the air to ceiling height, traversed across the ceiling, and came down gently and rested on my toes. And I was astonished at this. Absolutely incredible, you know. And then I said to myself, this thing is not going anywhere. Now, I did what is one of the most cardinal sins. As you know, you should never, ever interrupt psychic phenomena from happening. We know what happened to Helen Duncan, the famous Scottish medium, when the police raided her room when she was in trance. The ectoplasmic things went back into her body, hurting her. Anyway, what I did was I put my finger under the top of the small chest of drawers and said to myself, you are not going anywhere. And then suddenly this voice, I know it sounds crazy, but I can only tell you the truth. The spirit voice boomed out into the room. Was Mr. Robinson impressed by this? And I said to this voice and to the room, I'd be more impressed if you took it back. So this voice said, I know it sounds comical, but this is what happened. Then this voice said, we shall see what we can do. And like I said, I've got my finger trying to hold this thing back, and I said, you're going nowhere. You're going nowhere. And try as I might, this chest of drawers started to shudder, and I was pulling it back and pulling it back. I could not stop it. It just released from my finger and rose silently up into the air and moved across to the other side of the room and went back to where it once was. And at that point, a terrific burst of cold wind pervaded that room. And I've often said to people, if you can imagine, well, you're lying on a beach in Jamaica, you're lying in your swimwear, you're sweltering hot, then suddenly somebody throws you into a big freezer van with these hooks of meat. That's how cold it got. You could see your breath freezing up in front of you. It was an incredible experience. The downside of that is that I have no proof. The lady of the house refused to have any photographic cameras or recording equipment. And even if I had that recording equipment and, could show that to the skeptics, people would say, well, Malcolm, you just made that up on computer. Good job, sir. You made it up on computer. So sometimes, you can't win. Sometimes you have to be there yourself to see these things happening. Lovely story though it is, completely true. I'll never forget it.
That is an incredible story. And like you say, it's a shame that you can't get proof. Obviously, that's what you're investigating. You're trying to provide evidence of these things. But can I just ask, Malcolm, why the black curtain? Why does somebody have to sit behind a curtain? Why can they not be fully seen?
Well, this is entirely correct. I mean, this is something that, I've pondered over the years. If psychic phenomena can happen in that environment, why not just take the curtain away? Why do we need to have that? We know that in Victorian England, the curtain was back. You could see the physical medium sitting there in the chair. It just, yes, it does anger me to a degree that they can't do that. And it always seems to happen in darkness. Well, I say that not all the time. Some things happen, in electric light or in the daytime. But yes, we need to convince the skeptics, we need to draw back that curtain, as it were, and really look at the person sitting behind them. I mean, I've seen transfiguration, I've seen people's face change, etc. And it's quite incredible. Now, either the face did change, or alternatively, as my skeptical mind would say, when you stare at somebody's face in not an electric light, but kind of dark, illuminated light, maybe a small light, and you're staring at their face, your eyes begin to water and the lines on their face may change, and you think you're looking at a face when all of a sudden you're not. Your eyes are trying to make sense of them watering and looking at this face. Now, I remember when I stayed in London, this chap says, Malcolm, you know, you've got to come up and see this. I can make my face change. And I went, oh, here we go. So anyway, I took my good self up there to his house and I sat in front of him. And long story short, as I was staring into his face, he suddenly lost his hair. He was a completely bald head. Now, he did have hair. Then suddenly he sprouted a big beard, like Rasputin, you know, and I got a fright at this. And again, with my skeptical mind, I'm saying, well, I know my eyes are watering. I'm staring and staring at his face. What's going on here? And that footage, I actually took video footage of that as well. And that was used on a BBC daytime programme, which they put out to their viewers. So again, whilst psychic phenomena is clearly true for me as a researcher, having been involved in the subject for over 40 years, we've got to look at the other side of the coin. There are hoaxers out there. There are psychic mediums out to take the money out of your pocket and give you falsehoods. They're body reading, etc., etc. But we know this. But get rid of all that. It's like a big sieve. Once you sieve all the nonsense away, you're left with these beautiful, wonderful gems of truth, which won't go through that grill. And it's to those bits of truth that I've dedicated the rest of my life to.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic work as well, because we'd all love to get to the bottom of it and we'd all love to have some proof. What, in your experience, is a ghost?
Well, a ghost effectively, people would tend to say that it's someone who's passed on and they've left this earth plane, or possibly not. They're in it's an earthbound spirit. They remain on the earth plane. There may be lost souls. It sounds Hollywood, but, we can only say what's been told. And, but they're not all clear cut. You have ghosts that's transparent, your traditional ghosts. You have ghosts that's solid. People have passed them in the street. In fact, I was speaking to a lady not so long ago. She said that she saw this gentleman on the other side of the street walking as you were, just calmly down the street. And then she went, wait a minute, George has been dead for about 3 weeks. And it was him, she said. Then you have anniversary ghosts that will only be seen on, we'll say, for instance, the 21st of July, and they'll be walking down this stately, in this corridor in this stately home. You have crisis ghosts that will appear on certain anniversaries as well. You have the stone tape ghosts, which is another facet. I'd be here all day talking about that. So it's definitely different from a spirit. A spirit is clearly more your deceased person. It's like a ghost, you could say, is like an old VHS videotape of a recording. The more it's played, that video recording is getting lesser and lesser and weaker. The colours are diminishing. And eventually that ghost will just disappear. You won't see it anymore. Whereas a true spirit, someone who is looking to get in touch with Joe Public or family or relations, tend to be hanging around more than normal.
That's a brilliant explanation. Thank you. And I hadn't really considered all the different types of ghosts you could have, I suppose. And yet, in your experience, you can interact with a ghost. Therefore, surely that can't just be a replay of events that happened in a space once upon a time. There's something else happening. What's your explanation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are ghosts that are aware of you. There are ghosts that appear to talk to you. And yet, on the other hand, you've ghosts that are not aware of you whatsoever. Now this is crazy, you've even got ghosts who would go by a piece of furniture. Now, they could go walk through that furniture, but they tend not to. So we have to be careful what when we're looking at these ghostly phenomena, that they are indeed other alternatives as to what these are.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. It just fascinates me. And I know that you say that you've been touched by a ghost, slapped by a ghost.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I give a lot of talks and lectures and stuff, and always somebody puts their hand up. Mr. Robinson, can you be harmed by a ghost? And the answer to that is clearly yes, I'm afraid you can. That's not what people want to hear. Okay, maybe the more stay of that is your poltergeist, etc. But having said that, yes, I have indeed encountered ghosts that have kind of slapped me. I was in a haunted house, and well, let me tell you a few more stories. I was in a haunted house in Stirling, and this lady said that she was getting a lot of paranormal phenomena occurring in her home, things disappearing, etc. And we were in this room, and we had the lights subdued. There was only a small ambient light in the room. And our psychic who we were working with, she says, Malcolm, can't you heal spirit in this room? I went, no, sorry, Helen, I can't. I'm hopeless, you know, I'm not a psychic really, although maybe to a small degree. Sorry, Helen, no, can't feel anything. Oh, come on, clearly there's something in this room. She says, look, stand over there, put your arm out and ask spirit to touch you. What? Just do it. So I felt a bit foolish, so I stood at the other end of the room, this bedroom, and I put my arm out. I says, okay, if there's any spirit here, please kindly touch the back of my hand. 1 minute went by, nothing. 2 minutes went by, nothing. Oh, this is stupid. 3 minutes, bang. It was like a heavy man had pushed very forcibly my hand out, and it actually hit my thigh. And boy, did I get a fright at that. You know, it was really unbelievable. And then we were in a case in 1995 in Kirkintilloch. It was an ex-police officer's house. And boy, did we know we had a case on there, because as soon as we went in there, every wall had a photostat copy of the Lord's Prayer. Every door in this house had a crucifix hanging from it. And we knew straight away that there was something going on here. So again, long story short, because all these stories could go on for days, we went upstairs and we went into this child's bedroom. And suddenly it was like fingers brushing through my hair. And I said to my colleague, Billy Devlin, Billy, put the light on, because, you know, again, we always work in these subdued lights. Put the light on. What is it, Malcolm? Did you touch my hair? No, of course I didn't. And honestly, God, it was like fingers brushing through to my scalp and along the course of the top of my head. Quite bizarre it was. And yes, I've also been slapped by a ghost in a house as well. That was quite bizarre as well. But there's a lovely story when I worked for United Glass. It's a bottle manufacturing company in Alloa, and I worked here for 21 years. Anyway, I was there probably my first or second year there, and people began to realise that I was into spooky stuff and ghosts and UFOs. And they were okay. You know, they brought up newspaper cuttings. Oh, have you seen this, Malcolm? Apart from one guy, Bobby Smith. And he says, Malcolm, there's no such things as ghosts, mate. You get a better career, do something else. You know, you're talking rubbish. You're talking absolute rubbish. There's not such a thing as life after death or ghosts. And I went, really? He says, yeah. He says, Mark, I'll tell you what I'll do. See, when I die, and God forbid it's many, many, many years from now, if there is such a thing about life after death, I'll come back. Oh, thank you, Bobby. And so years went by, and I got up for a day shift. We started at 6 a.m. So I went down to the kitchen about 5 o'clock in the morning. My wife was sleeping upstairs. The whole house was quiet. Everything was subdued and quiet. And I went to the kettle to put water in the kettle. And then suddenly I got that feeling that somebody is standing right behind you. And I slowly turned round and I saw nothing at all. I went, oh, God almighty, that's weird. Anyway, I went to my work and I went into the men's mess room before we started our shift, and everybody was hanging their heads and we were all solemn. I went, guys, come on, cheer up. What's the matter with you lot? Oh, have you not heard? I've not heard what? Wee Bobby Smith died last night. Now, that was a man who years ago said that if there is such a thing as a life after death, he would come back and prove it. Now, I never saw him. By God, did I feel something. It was really crazy.
Very, very interesting. So, from a scientific point of view and an investigative point of view, how do you explain these things? How can you explain what is happening say, for instance, the fingers through your hair. We are frightened because we don't understand the phenomena. But what can you explain of it so far in your experience?
Well, the only way I could explain it is by giving you my honest felt opinion. And that was spirit reacting with me to let me know they were there. When my hand got pushed down, when I felt fingers through my hair, that was spirit clearly there. Now, we all know that that's hard to prove. The scientific community need more evidence than that. But again, what constitutes evidence? And I've said this many times before in other shows. What constitutes evidence? We can have the best photographic evidence in the world, but that could have been manipulated on computer. But by the same token, a ghost photograph could be proved or disproved by the same technology. Pixel separation, edge enhancement, color contouring. Was it just a piece of paper stuck on a glass pane and photographed through that? So technology can prove, and thankfully it has done, some wonderful ghostly photographs. But again, the bottom line, what constitutes proof? What gives the scientific fraternity that overall feeling that, yeah, hey, there is a life after death? Because technically, apart from people like myself and my colleagues overseas and the world over, we don't have that God to honest truth. When people go to spiritualist mediums, yes, they'll get some wonderful proof. The skeptics will say, well, that's just cold reading. Maybe she knew in advance of that lady, etc. That's possible. But having said that, I've attended many psychic events, and by golly, I've seen some wonderful evidence being portrayed to people with tears in their eyes and saying, how could you have known that? Even my own husband doesn't know that. And yet you know that. So either they're gaining this information through reading body language or through their own mind, their subconscious mind, which in itself, if that's the case, then even that's extraordinary. But no, for me personally, it is the people who have passed on relaying this wonderful accounts. They're letting their loved ones know that they're still around. Now, listeners of your show may say, well, I've lost people and they've not come to see me. Yes, I agree with that. And the only thing I can say there is perhaps there's some form of mechanism which doesn't allow every person to come back and say or trying to relay that they're still alive, they're still here. And I've often said you can have 6 people in a haunted room maybe in a ghost investigation, say, for instance, 6 people. 3 will say, oh my God, do you see that? And the other 3 will go, well, I can't see anything. So it's my contention that the more psychically aware you are, the more psychically attuned you are, then the more you will be aware of psychic phenomena happening. Now, it's like an old radio before, you've got the DAB radios. When you turn the dial from BBC Radio 1 to BBC Radio 2, you were turning the dial, changing the frequency until you hit that beautiful frequency of, for instance, Radio 1. Well, that's the same with psychic individuals. They are already tuned in. We know about our animals. Our animals are very, very psychic as well. And they can pick up these frequencies and vibrations. They can see colours. They can hear things way above the human mind, etc. So there's a lot going on for sure, yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? So in terms of evidence and proof, do you have any?
We have photographic proof, but again, the skeptics will say that's just been manufactured on computer. We have loads of stories. Is that proof? Probably not. And I think proof, like I said before, proof probably only comes when you're in a haunted location or you've experienced ghostly phenomena. That is your proof. Nobody will change it for you. You can go, or I've got you a psychic spiritualist event. Nobody will change it for you. I remember my father, when he saw me growing up, getting interested in this, he pulled me aside and he said, son, your granny, my mother, as you know, she passed away a few weeks ago. I says, yes, Dad, I remember, yes. He said, well, I haven't told you this. A week or so after she passed away, I was lying in my bed and the light was out. I wasn't sleeping, son. He clearly said that. Son, I wasn't sleeping. And then suddenly I heard my name being called. Robert, Robert, look at me, look at me. And he knew that that was his mother who had died a week or so prior to this. He decided, in his terrified yet excited state, to pull down the covers and look. And there, in the corner of the room, was this beautiful aquamarine light, beautiful light. And there, standing in the midst of that, was his mother. Now, the thing was, she didn't look 80 odd when she passed. She looked about 30 odd, 35. She looked younger. She looked radiant. And people have said that when they have seen their loved ones again coming back to them, they don't always look as when they passed on. They look younger. Now, she said, son, I have passed on. I'm moving on to a better place. Now, again, that sounds Hollywood, but you got to be truthful on these podcasts. You got to tell it as it is. I'm moving on to a better place. Now, here's the rub. She disappeared eventually like a dimmer switch. Now, my father said that his brothers, my uncles, also saw their mother that same night in this beautiful radiant light, saying goodbye and moving on. Now, is that, to answer your question, is that evidence? Again, it's not. It's only a wonderful story. True story, but wonderful.
But something is obviously going on, something, because we have hundreds of thousands, millions probably, of people across the world from every culture, every country, who are having these strange and inexplicable paranormal experiences. And I know that you are continuously on the lookout for new equipment and paranormal research techniques. What sort of things do you wish were invented, or what are you working with at the moment in terms of equipment and stuff?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because obviously in today's technology, we have K2 meters, we have this meter, that meter, we have so many different things to entice psychic phenomena to appear or interact with. And yes, you watch any television show and you'll see these K2 meters going off crazily, these red lights, the green lights, etc. So clearly the people say, well, this is spirits interacting with this type of equipment. We had Spiricom back in the day. We had Konstantin Rodov with his spirit voices, where he recorded his voices. We have electronic voice phenomena, which allegedly captures these disembodied spirit voices, etc. But the strange thing for me is only ever usually snatches of conversation. You know, that might be get out, or it could be this is not for you. Little short sentences. We don't appear to interact with this. And then, of course, we have the Franks box and other devices. The Franks box, for those who don't know, it's like a big radio. It's never tuned into any particular frequency. It roams around frequencies. And allegedly, if you speak and want to contact a deceased relative or whoever, you'll say their name and you'll hear what appears to be confirmation. That, to me, I'm not enamored by that at all. I'm not enamored by all these gadgets and gizmos and gadgets. Me personally, I don't believe in any of that. Yes, it's a good tool. We should have tools to go into any given investigation. But for me personally, I've always worked with psychics, people who I would stake my life on, people who, I mean, the psychics we have used over the years. I remember we walked into one particular alleged haunted house, and I always watch your psychic as she goes into it. And you could see her face. She'll nod her head and go, oh, yes, I've got something here. Or she'll shake her head and say she's getting nothing. So for us personally, we have that. When you look at the Skull experiment as well, they sat in a seance for a number of weeks before phenomena started to happen. But they were demanding that spirit happen. They got spirit lights, they got spirit hands. They even got a small blue, not grey, but a blue alien's face, the Skull experiment. SCOLE, if anybody wants to look that up on Google. So when we look back to evidence, we've had all this, we've had all this in the seance room, we have all these gadgets, etc. But again, I can only go back to what I say is it comes from within. It comes from yourself. Admittedly, yes, of course, we'd love to have dynamic evidence to show Joe public and say, look here, you can't get around this, and maybe this is why we need This is now taking it to a different level. Maybe this is why we need some of the big wigs of the BBC or the ITN networks or scientific people to come on a ghost bus with people like myself or my colleagues, either in the UK or America. Get these big guys who think it's all a load of rubbish. Join us and let them enjoy, let them see, fingers crossed, paranormal phenomena will happen. It would be interesting to see what they say, these guys who, don't believe in the subject. Would that be evidence? Because these guys are, these are analytical thinkers. Would that convince Joe public? We could go on, but it's an individual thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love that to happen, but I'd love it to be made with plenty of time, because a lot of paranormal programs are made for, to reach a crescendo for the viewer, and it's not necessarily paranormal activity, let's put it that way. So it would be good to have proper investigation scientifically done by, as you say, the bigwigs that can follow a team of investigators for some time, like a documentary. That would be very, very interesting.
It would indeed. And maybe that would paint a picture in regards to looking at these things seriously, because now you've not got a team of psychic investigators, you've got a team of individuals. It could be made up from all walks of life, police officers, medical people, scientific people, and get that done. I mean, again, if we talk about evidence, here's another incident that happened in the town of Hastings in East Sussex, which I miss very dearly, by the way. I'm now back in Scotland. Anyway, this lady came to one of our meetings in Hastings and she says, Malcolm, I work for the Conquest Hospital in here. Yes, I do, yes. Well, one of our leading surgeons is off due to stress. I went, well, that's not so surprising. He must see a lot of things happening. Oh, no, you don't understand. Well, pray tell me. And here's what she told me. She said that this leading surgeon was walking down one of the corridors of this hospital and he saw an elderly gentleman standing there alone. And he walked up to him and he said, You okay? You all right? I don't know. You don't know? Are you sure you're okay? And just then the leading surgeon's pager went off. He says, excuse me a moment, sir. And he turned to his pager, he looked at it, and he was wanted in the resource room immediately. So he turned round to say to the gentleman, and, cheerio, so to speak, but he wasn't there. But he never thought nothing of it because there were swing doors quite near where the gentleman was standing. So anyway, I think you know where I'm going with this story, but there is a twist. So he walked into the resource room, this surgeon, and there, on the bed of this resource room, was the very man who had saw in the corridor with paddles on his chest, pumping him, trying to bring him back to life. So here's where the story gets weird. The leading surgeon says, wait a minute, how can this be? I was just speaking to that guy. Let's see the CCTV footage. Again, this is getting back to your question about evidence. So they went to the CCTV footage. They rewound it back, and you could clearly see this leading surgeon walking down the corridor of the hospital. He stopped, he looked up, and he spoke to nothing at all. So is that evidence? Is that evidence that would convince? It certainly convinced the leading surgeon. He was so much in shock that he was off due to stress due to that. So again, it's all individual, or who knows.
It's all fascinating. That's such a brilliant story as well. So Malcolm, how do you deal with your fear sometimes? Do you ever feel frightened going to some dark places, dark buildings, and wondering what might happen?
Yeah, of course, it'd be foolish not to. You always go in with trepidation. When we're bringing a psychic along, we don't tell her anything about where it might be. It's usually a council house, etc. The least she knows, the better. And we do all the background work. We try and find out what's been going on. I said, for instance, I was dealing with this lady one time and I said, are you interested in ghosts and spirits? Oh, no, son, no, not me, no. And I looked behind her, near in the bookcase. The bookcase was flooded by ghostly books. So you have to be very observant, And, but yeah, so I forgot where I was going with the story now.
It was just about your fear. Do you ever feel frightened?
Yes, I mean, of course you do. You have you've got to be very careful when you go into any given situation. First and foremost, as I said, you have to ensure that the story that's being relayed to you is correct, it's validated. We have to check the very foundations of where that house stood. Is it on a battlefield? Are there any ley lines crossing it? You've got to dot the I's and cross the T's and, try and find out, are there any other reasons that this house may be haunted? Are they looking for notoriety, this family? Are they trying to be rehoused? Maybe they've tried everything in their power to get out of this council house and they can't. So what's left? Oh, I know, let's make up a ghost. Maybe the council will rehouse us. So all this is in the back of your mind. So as far as being scared, yeah, there have been several times when I have been scared. Again, we were dealing a case on the outskirts of London, and my girlfriend at the time, we had went outside for a cigarette, and unbeknown to us when we were outside, the other psychic lady who we were working with at that time, she was administering healing to this lady. She was so freaked out by the phenomena that was ongoing in our family home. So we were outside, we came back in, we sat down, and this lady was sitting in a chair in the middle of the living room. And then suddenly I screamed out, "Oh my God!" Now, what I was looking at was hundreds of small globules of these beautiful aquamarine lights flooding all over the lady, moving around her head, moving around her face, moving around her body down to the floor. And instantaneously, my girlfriend shouted out, "Yes, I can see it. I can see this." And the poor old woman's going, "What? What?" She was scared. "What are you looking at? What is it?" And I looked at the psychic and she just she's nodding her head and I'm going, "What's this? What's this?" And she says, "Malcolm, what you're looking at is the remnants of my psychic healing. When you were out having a cigarette, I was administering psychic healing to this lady, and what you're looking at is the remnants of that." And it only lasted a few seconds. Now, it was a combination of being frightened and being excited at the very same time. So, yeah, that's one of the cases, yeah.
Beautiful. What a lovely thing to witness as well. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's one of these things that happens over the years. You cannot be involved in the subject and not come away with some strange, bizarre tales or scary tales. Here's another one. I was working with I think it was a ghost club when I was living down in England, and we went to Woodchester Mansion. And it's an old stately home. There's no furniture or fittings anymore. Only in the ground floor. And we were there to do an investigation. Now, I'm terrible. Just what I mean by that is I don't always do what I'm told. And the lady who was controlling this investigation of about 12 to 15 members said, "Now, whatever you do, come with me. Don't wander off yourself and get lost." Because it was late at night, it was very dark. So what did I do? I wandered off myself. And there was this passageway leading upstairs. It was all boarded off with wooden boards going left, going right. And I pulled at them. I made sure, the group was well away, or we were further up. And I pulled at these boards and some of them came loose. And I just gingerly went into this area with my torch. And it was a set of stairs that leaded up to the small room. So I went up to the small room and I lay down on my back against the wall. And you could hear the cows gently mooing in the farmland. And I was asking Spirit to come forward and make themselves known. Nothing was happening. So I stood up and I was walking backwards. I don't know why, but I was walking backwards and I said, "Spirit, if you're there, come forward, come to me." And I walked backwards and I walked backwards. Then I stopped. And at that point, what happened was I just was aware that I shouldn't go any further. And then I turned slowly around and I looked down and there was a drop of about 30 to 40 feet. There were no more part of that room. It was just a void. Now, if I hadn't had this feeling that something was happening, I may have walked to my death. Now, that was frightening. Again, getting back to your question, anything frightening happening to me, that clearly was. And obviously that staircase was boarded off for that reason. But Yeah, I'm still here.
They're still here to tell the tale. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And I'm just thinking about people listening at home. And I wonder if you could just give us a little exercise. And here's the thing: once upon a time, this was quite a few years ago, my children were much younger. I was experimenting with EVP, electronic voice projection. I think that's what it is, electronic voice projection.
Uh,
And is that right?
Electronic voice phenomena.
Electronic voice phenomena. Thank you. And I had an old fashioned, remember the old fashioned tape, the cassette tape, handheld cassette tapes. I had one of those and I had it on. I think you press play and record back in those
Yes.
days. And then I had the tap on. So I had a little bit of water coming out to create some white noise. And then I went into my next room and I was doing some research for something. Can't remember what I was doing. Then I went back after about half an hour and I replayed the tape that was recording in the kitchen with just the white noise of the tap. And there was just one word on that tape. And it so clearly said studying. And I thought, gosh, and that's what I was doing in the room next door. And I found that fantastic. So my question is, if we wanted as listeners to try something like that for ourselves at home, we don't really have cassette tapes now. Can we do it on a mobile phone, do you think, on a recording device? How do you think we could do that?
Yeah, I always said to any investigation we go to, we ask when we move away from that house, we ask the occupants of the house to do that. And you can do that by, if you have an iPhone, you will have an audio part of that where you can do recordings and just gently go into, more so if you believe your house is haunted, gently go into one of the rooms, make sure everything's quiet, there are no televisions on and no traffic outside, and just gently speak into your mobile phone on record and say, if spirit is with me, please make yourself known. And give it maybe about 15, 20 seconds, maybe ask another question. Are you male? Are you female? And just diversify the questions and give it about 15, 20 seconds gap and then replay that. And that's when you get to hear some incredible voices. Not all the time, admittedly, but sometimes you will get a name, a voice, a sound, or etc. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to try. And again, getting back to your question on evidence, is that evidence? You could play that to somebody and you'll always get the skeptic saying, oh, that was a friend of yours in the room saying that. So that's the problems you have. But that's an exercise for your listeners to try. And that is to take your iPhone and put it on record and then just do that and see what happens.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to try that. When this is finished, I'm going to straight into my dining room because I live in this 17th century cottage. Well, my partner does, and I'm visiting him. And I think there must be lots and lots of historical things that have happened here. So I'm going to go and try that. But just before you go, Malcolm, I know you also work investigating UFOs and such things. Can you tell us a little bit, perhaps a story or two of your UFO experiences?
Well, again, there are many of that, many stories you could tell. I suppose probably one of the better ones is the story that took me off the skeptical fence, because when I started in this field, Anne, I was very, very skeptical. I felt there were no validity to ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, what a load of rubbish. But it's like anything else in life, once you traverse through life, once you get your hands dirty, once you speak to people, once you put yourself in those environments, there's no smoke without fire. So the UFO case that took me off the fence is a well-known case. I've written a book about it. It's called the Deathment Woods UFO Incident. And it occurred in 1979. I was probably about 22 years of age at that time. And the story goes as follows. A 61-year-old forestry worker, Robert Taylor, who was actually a war veteran. You know, he liberated Bergen-Belsen with his tank regiment. He's seen the horrors of the war. And from there he went, after the war, he worked at various jobs in Scotland. Anyway, he was now employed by the Livingston Development Corporation Forestry Department. And his job was to ensure that no cattle or sheep strayed into the woods. It was a menial job. It was a job he's done many, many times before. He had no interest in UFOs whatsoever. Like all of us, he had heard about it on the television, but he had no interest. All that was to change. All that changed on the morning of November the 9th, 1979. He was in his pickup truck, accompanied on the journey with his Irish red setter dog, Lara. They drove up to the forest, they jumped out of the truck, and they started to walk down this forestry ride. There were trees to the left, trees to the right. And as he was walking down the forestry ride, they came upon a clearing, a sloping clearing in the woods. And there, about 40, 50 feet above the surface of the grass, was this large dome-shaped object with a flange going around its perimeter. And parts of it disappeared, and then it would solidify, then it would desolidify. You could see the young trees in the background, and his dog was barking furiously at this. And Robert Taylor, he's never seen the likes of that in his life. What the hell is this? And then suddenly, as if the scene couldn't get any more stranger and bizarre, it did. Because what resembled 2 Second World War sea mines, if you cast your mind back into those war movies, you saw these circular mines with these prods sticking out, floating in the North Atlantic and the shipping lanes, all resembling them, and dropped down from beneath this object, impacted on the grass, and started to slowly roll across the grass towards it. Needless to say, I mean, obviously he's terrified. And then they stopped, and then they projected these rod-like projections to his person, grabbing him very forcibly at his hips and pulled him very forcibly downwards towards the grass. Now, just before he lost consciousness, he remembers a terrible burning smell pervading the whole area, and also a swishing sound or a swooshing sound, and then bang, he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, the larger object was gone, the smaller objects were gone. There was over 40 holes and impressions in the grass, triangular and circular impressions, track-like marks. He had a nasty graze on his forehead, he had a nasty graze under his chin, he had a terrible pounding headache, he had a terrible thirst, his trousers were torn, his jersey was all muddied, and he managed to stagger back to his pickup truck, and he tried to radio bass, but he found he couldn't speak. His voice was completely dry. So he managed to stagger back to his home in a small town of Deans, which is near Livingston, and Livingston is near Edinburgh in central Scotland. When his wife saw him, she went, "What the hell has happened to you?" And he said, and again I can only tell the truth to what he said, "I've been attacked." You're what? You've been attacked by who? By men? No, by a spaceship thing. So she said to her husband, "Look, come in, there are no such things as a spaceship. Come on, what's going on with you?" But then she realised she had been married to her husband for years. She loved the man, and she knew her husband would not make up a story of that nature. Long story short, she telephoned the local doctor, local GP. He attended the family dwelling. He attended to Bob. He had an elevated heart rate. He kept complaining of a smell, but nobody else could smell it. And then he said, "Look, we've got to ask you to go to Bangor Hospital," which was about a mile or so away from where they lived. Again, long story short, he went there. He waited 1 hour. He waited 2 hours. He waited to be seen. Nobody came near him, so he discharged himself. By that time, his forestry boss, Malcolm Drummond, had notified the police, and they went up with Bob to the area, and there, yes, clear as a bell, clear as day, were these marks on the grass. The police fenced off the area, and it was treated as a criminal investigation by person or persons unknown. Clearly, this was something happened there. And this is when I became involved. I interviewed Bob several times. I interviewed police officers several times, one of which, Detective Sergeant Ian Wark, knew Bob from down the local bowling club. He says, "Malcolm, he's a salt of an earth guy. He would never make up a crazy story like this." So in 1993, we, with the help of the Livingston Council, had a big cairn put there with a plaque. And then a few years ago, with the West Lothian Council, I managed to get signage put into the woods, which allowed people to find this location, because people were travelling from all over the world wanting to see this area, but they couldn't find it. They didn't know where to go. So now, with the help of the West Lothian Council and the signage, people can now go to that site and see where it happened. And he always said, he says, Malcolm, oh God, how I wish you had have seen what I saw that day. But getting back to your question earlier about evidence, it's one man, it's his testimony, and it's individual.
Absolutely fascinating. Malcolm Robinson, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of these incredible stories and evidence in themselves, I feel. But like you say, how can we prove it? It's so interesting. And I'm sure that everybody listening will just find this really fascinating, truly food for thought. Where can people get hold of you if they want to get in contact, Malcolm?
Well, I do have a Facebook site, and if they look for Malcolm Robinson on Facebook, the image to see is of my Socky Poltergeist book. So if you see that image, that'll be me. And again, if anybody wants to read any of my books, they are available on Amazon. That's a combination of books dealing with ghosts and poltergeists, also Nessie, and also UFOs. And yeah, so it's all there. People can find it there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Malcolm. I wish you all the very, very best with everything going forward. It's been fabulous talking to you today.
Thank you very much, Anne. And you're doing a wonderful, wonderful job yourself. You're educating people with these podcasts. So long may it continue.
Thank you. Malcolm Robinson there, everyone. Wasn't that just a brilliant conversation? I have so many questions. I could speak to Malcolm all day, and definitely I'm going to invite him back as a guest. Meantime, if you want to know more about his work, you can purchase his books on Amazon. And to get the URLs and links easily and anything mentioned in this podcast episode, go to my website, anteato.com, and click on the podcast tab, and you'll find the full transcript along with the show notes. And there will be links there which will take you directly to Malcolm's work. Meanwhile, I wish you all a wonderful couple of weeks. Don't forget to support and subscribe to my new YouTube channel at Psychic Matters. And if you've had a paranormal experience that you'd like to share with us, you can leave a voice recording and send it to me by email, or you can just send me an email. That would be wonderful. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your experiences. Send your stories to anne@anteato.com. My name is Anne Teato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.